Let me make something very clear before we do get going. Alexa Bliss is great. She has been a bona fide superstar ever since she debuted in NXT, and pretty much since she was caught up to the main roster, she has proven time and time again, you should push me and you should do something with me because I understand this pro wrestling malarkey. But that is not what we are focusing on today's video, and instead we are going to turn our attentions to the current character that she's playing. And you know what? Just to confuse the matter just a little bit more, I actually think she does a pretty damn good job with that as well. I mean, there are plenty of other people on WWE's books that if you said to them, hey, we want you to walk around and be this undead, possessed zombie person, and they wouldn't be able to do it at all, to the point you'd want to pull your eyeballs out. I mean, let's go back in time. Do you remember when Barry Windham came into the World Wrestling Federation and he was the stalker? It didn't matter what Barry was going to do, all of that was always going to suck. The problem, though, is how this persona is being used, and really, when you take a step back and look at it, it's just not clicking, which makes it a very, very poor WWE creation. Why? Here's why. Now, as ever, if you do love it, and this is your favorite thing about the world of pro wrestling, more power to you. You are living the wrestling dream, and right now you can just start flipping me off on YouTube because I'm not going to be able to see it. That's not how the internet works. But before we went on this flight of fancy with Alexa Bliss, I thought that where we'd ended up was perfect for her character. I mean, she already felt like a star, so why didn't we just take variations of this and figure out how to portray it week in and week out? I mean, we even had a little bit of fun with it. Do you remember the mixed match challenge and all of a sudden she was like, oh, Braun Strowman, and he was like, oh, Alexa Bliss. That was just a nice thing to watch, even if it was a little bit silly. Somehow, though, from nowhere, it was this relationship that served as the catalyst to where we are now. Because ages after the mixed match challenge, all of a sudden Alexa was like the desire of Braun Strowman's wishes or some gibberish like that, to the point we had that swamp fight at Extreme Rules The Horror Show in 2020, and we all remember what happened with that. And look, I get why we did this. At the time, the world had been sunken into the pandemic, and WWE, along with every other promotion, was going, well, we don't have our crowd anymore, and I'm pretty sure, let me check, oh yeah, the crowd are really important to what we do, so how do we spice things up? Well, we'll do a bunch of silliness like this. And look, when it gets to cinematic matches, some of them were really good, and some of them were not so good. And personally, yes, I would take that there swamp fight and probably put it in the latter category. From there, though, it was just madness. Because Alexa had had some kind of contact with The Fiend, all of a sudden she was this bonkers person and had that mini feud with their best friend, Nikki Cross. But even that didn't really have a payoff. They did a little something, and then it just faded off into the ether. Soon after, she properly aligned herself with Bray as well, and they were waving at us on the Firefly Funhouse, and even that was fine, like it wasn't offensive. But as soon as these two went into a feud with Randy Orton, we just kept escalating and escalating and escalating, to the point Alexa Bliss was being Ryu from Street Fighter and firing fireballs, and also making black goo come out of Randy Orton's head. And I don't really care if you want to give somebody magic, but you've got to explain to me how the hell they got this magic. Like, I never saw Bray Wyatt or The Fiend have proper powers, so I doubt she got it from him. And really, this was just WWE once again going, well, we don't have any fans, we're in the Thunderdome. What can we get away with given that we aren't live? And we came up with this. It then went overboard at WrestleMania when Bliss turned on The Fiend, and to this moment, I still have absolutely no idea why. So we saw Bliss pining for her former friend after he was burned alive for months, and then when he did come back, she just went, nah, brah, I don't want anything to do with you anymore. And what am I meant to do with that as a fan? If I was going to try and explain it to my mum, for example, who does not watch wrestling, she'd be like, Simon, this is absolute gibberish. It doesn't fit together at all. When you can't actually describe this stuff, you are going to divide people down the middle because it just gets a little bit confusing. The fact she then literally became The Fiend was even more baffling, and then all of a sudden, poof, she had a doll called Lilly. Now, we were told that she'd had this from childhood, so somebody make sense of that one. And it was quite clear that we were going to take inspiration from Annabelle and inspiration from Chucky and turn it into some kind of demonic doll. The problem there is that it's asking you to accept things that pro wrestling just isn't very good at. For example, if Alexa Bliss does all have this voodoo, why hasn't she used it to become the women's champion? She could just walk out there and go, hey, Rhea Ripley, turn her into a frog, beat the frog, and all of a sudden she's got the gold. The most recent adventure came on Raw when, yes, she used all of this hocus pocus to get in the head of Shayna Baszler, but even then, was she in the head of Shayna Baszler, or was what I was seeing real? Because you saw Lilly in a mirror and Shayna Baszler was freaking out, but I was able to see Lilly in that mirror too, so were the powers infecting me? This is when my brain shuts off and I just want to lay on the ground. And really, if you're going to do horror, you have to make it scary, and it just wasn't that terrifying at all, which then leads us on to the other question, which is why we are doing this with Shayna Baszler. Do you know how hard it is to find someone in the world of professional wrestling that feels legit? It's really hard, and we have someone, and now we're just going, oh yeah, when we go off Raw, can you scream really loudly? And she has to go, yes. And look, fair play to Shayna. She did as best as she could, but it was always going to be a hard thing to pull off. You've got to figure that we are heading towards the end of this, because when we do have an audience back in an arena, there's no way you can do it. And I imagine we're going to get really extreme with it soon, but that doesn't mean that you should keep doing it regardless. If something isn't working, you should knock it on the head. And sure, if you're into it, somebody better come and shut my mouth, but let's just look at the ratings. It's not like they're lighting the world on fire, is it? So you have to imagine en masse, most people are like, this isn't for me. And that's not just because of this angle either. Raw has many foibles at the moment, but seeing all those foibles and then ending a 3-hour show with this, I don't think it's going to get many individuals to want to tune in next week. In fact, it actually made me fear what is coming, because where is the line? Like, is this doll going to pin and beat Shayna Baszler? And then after that, are Alexa Bliss and Lilly going to become the women's tag team champions? You may be going, Simon, what a stupid thing to say, but is it? Is it really? Or can you actually see it happening? In fact, I'm going to call it now. Before we do get live crowds back into buildings, Lilly and Alexa Bliss will take on Natalya and Tamina. There is nobody meaner apart from Lilly, and those two will become the women's tag team champions. I mean, Braun Strowman teamed with a 12-year-old, or however old Nicholas was, so why the hell can't we do this? If you're getting mad at me now because you're like, Miller, you moron, you just put that into existence, you're right, I did do that, so some blame does have to go on my shoulders, but I think they're going to do it. I don't think they're like, well, we'll do whatever the hell we want, despite what anybody says. So we'll end with a doll, a Cabbage Patch Kid holding some tiles. In closing too, I do want to make it clear that I respect WWE for trying new things. I mean, look at the rest of Raw. It becomes so painful to watch because it is just the same thing week in, week out. But that doesn't mean you just throw everything at the wall and then continue to throw things at said wall. Find the ones that are working and maybe focus on that instead. I mean, ever since the Hell in a Cell 2019, this whole Fiend idea has kind of been on a downward spiral. So just taking the gimmick and putting it onto somebody else's shoulders, well, that was never going to work and it was never going to last that long. So it's probably time to head in a new direction, especially when it comes to Alexa Bliss, because she had a good persona. So let's get back to that as soon as we can and push her strengths as much as possible. Remember that time she dislocated her arm because she's got funny joints and it was like the greatest submission attempt ever? Sure you do. That was something to talk about. And while we're also talking about this, it's often greeted with, oh, I can't believe it. Also though, remember, June 9th, 2021, Simon Miller predicted that Alexa Bliss and Lilly will become the women's tag team champions. And if I'm right, you can hate me. And if I'm wrong, well, everybody will forget about it anyway. Because it's one of those situations your brain will go, oh my gosh, Simon called it. So I can't lose. Go me. Now, please do head into those comments and let me know the truth. I want to hear all sides of the argument. Do you like Alexa Bliss' character? Do you like Lilly? Are you actually excited to see where it's going to go? Once more power to you. Then please do like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Head over to whatculture.com where you can read articles like this and be kept up to date with the news. Come say hello on social media, and you're already on YouTube. Click another video. Make sure you have a damn good time. My name is Simon from What Culture. Thank you very much for joining me as always. And remember, the Why series is there to spark debate. Let's keep it civil. And I will see you on the next one. And I bet you've been flipping me off the whole time. But it's like rubber bullets. Ding, ding. It bounces off me until I go to sleep at night. And then I cry. But I've been doing that for a while. None of that is true. Don't know why I said it. See ya.